Welcome to Serenity Wealth Now with Chris Cooper. This is not your typical financial radio show. As a licensed CPA, insurance agent, and investment advisory representative, Chris coaches his clients on a holistic view of financial well-being with an objective of providing a complete financial strategy to fund life's goals. Chris is here to guide you down the path to the financial serenity you deserve. Now, here's Chris Cooper.
All right, good morning. We are basically halfway through the month of February, just celebrated Valentine's Day, thinking about our loved ones in our life. And I thought to myself, you know what? When we're thinking about loved ones, caring for our loved ones, we need to have conversations that impact and influence our loved ones. So decided I'd reach out to my friend Shona McIntyre, bring her back in as a guest to talk about caring for our loved ones. Shona, how are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, tell a little bit more. I mean, people are probably familiar with you now. You've been on our show a few times. What do you do to help the people that we love?
I work with seniors and their families when they are ready to start looking for an assisted living or memory care community.
Yeah.
And I just guide them through the process and help them find the right fit. So when they do make that move, they get it right that first time.
Right. And most people don't, unfortunately. There's a lot of people that find a community because they're forced to make quick decisions and then end up having to move into a different community down the road.
Exactly right, yes.
So one of the things I tend to hear about communities is that, it's a tough industry. There's a lot of, care is a little bit questionable at times. There's a lot of transition, a lot of turnover. So when you look for the right community for your loved one, what are some of those things you really need to think about that are important?
One of the first things I really look at in a community is what's the longevity of their executive director?
Okay.
What's the longevity of their director of nursing? What's the turnover like? Every community is going to have the turnover in the frontline staff.
It's a tough job.
Absolutely. It's really
And they do
hard.
it their best. I hope all communities do their best to do that, but it's still a very tough job.
Yes.
So.
And they all have the marketing that tells you they're doing a great job and the salespeople that tell you this is what we're going to do for you. But what I'm really looking for with those communities is how long has your administrator been there? If they've been there 10 plus years and they've had a lot of stabilization, 9 times out of 10, that community is providing amazing care.
Yeah. Now you've and then obviously you've got great relationships with communities that that you trust because of the experience that you bring into things as well.
Yes.
So, all right. So, with Valentine's Day and thinking about our loved ones, do you have special Valentine's Day plans that you tend to do, or did you do anything fun for Valentine's Day with your loved one?
We just like to grill steaks and spend time with our kiddos.
Well, there you go. Yep. Kiddos, they actually give you a Valentine.
Yes.
Probably, right?
Oh, yeah.
Mine are too old now, and they were boys, so I don't get that same kind of treatment. So, and Stacy she's not a flower girl, so I don't have to worry about, that kind of stuff.
Same.
At least she says that. Do you mean that? Do you guys really mean that you're not flowers, or should I be bringing flowers to people? No,
I would prefer to just buy a good steak.
Okay. All right, good. That's what I've been told, but is this real? So there you go. It's on record.
Yes.
Brian's safe.
He's safe. Yeah.
All right, cool. All right. So it is important to make sure our loved ones are taken care of. So what we're really talking about is, long-term care planning. And when we think about this stuff, I have a lot of conversations with people that are, it's vulnerable having financial conversations, right? So I try to make it comfortable for people. We talk about tax risk. We talk about taxes. We love to talk about taxes because we hate paying the government anything, right? I'm sure you don't like to pay the government taxes either, do you?
No.
Yeah. But we need some of the benefits. So we get trying to pay fair share, but our definition of fair share is as little as we can humanly possibly pay. Everyone says that. So we have that conversation. We openly will actually end up having conversations about our own death because we all know we're going to pass away at some point in time. It's a pretty reasonable conversation to have. And we want to make sure we plan for those things in advance. The thing that is the most difficult conversation for people that I have conversations with or discuss this with is no one wants to talk about incapacitation, loss of control, the inability to do things in our daily life. And that's really when a lot of the times your conversations you have are when people are at that most vulnerable state in their mind.
Correct. Yeah. Unfortunately, like what you said, most people don't want to think about, we all know we're not getting out of life alive. And we always think about, we don't want to live in a community. We're going to be home and stay there forever. But we don't ever want to think about what happens if we can't.
Right.
So
that forever home. We always talk about it. Whenever we're looking at a new house, you always want that forever home. Right?
Right.
At some point in time, you transition to that thought of forever home. But it doesn't always take place that way. And if we're living longer lives, and that requires some different items, and we have to think about the care that we will need, and that is, a challenging conversation. And I think it gets back to that control. Now, are you a control freak personally? I am. I will admit. So.
No, I really can't be with what I do.
You see it so much the other way.
Right.
Yeah.
My seniors and their families are in control, really. Yeah. I'm just there to guide them and give them all the right information. So when they are ready to make the move, I've seen situations where I'm, oh my goodness, if they don't do something now, we're going to be in a lot of hurt.
Right.
But I can't control the situation. So I have to guide.
No, and what I meant by control is more taking control myself,
oh, sure.
right? I like the control to go to me and my families work with.
Yeah.
I am a control freak. And what I always say is if we don't have these complicated conversations in advance, somebody else is making decisions for us.
That's very true.
And I would much rather make that decision in advance, have a little bit more say in that decision, and that's where that advanced planning comes into play. Mm-hmm. So how many people do you work with have an advanced plan, or do you get more so in that emergency planning situation?
I would say about 95% of the clients I work with were in emergency situations. Yeah.
That's tough.
It is.
And what do you, in your opinion, it should be the reverse, right? Only 5% should be emergency based.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It makes everything go so much easier and so much smoother when they're calling me a year out from when they're really needing to make a move versus being bedside at the hospital, being told they can't go home. Right.
So let's talk about some easy things you can do to plan in advance. Okay. So what do you think, the top of mind, what comes up first?
I think the first number one easiest thing you can do is really get real on your finances and find out how much money do we actually have and what can we spend on a community. That's so legacy. First and foremost.
Absolutely. I think that makes complete sense. I always tell people we want to save for retirement. First of all, we want to control our life today. We want to make sure we can enjoy our life right now in today's world. Then we want to make sure fun, let's say Shona, we're going to use your name. So fun Shona, we need future Shona to have fun too. Right? So Shona today needs to have fun, but Shona in the future needs to have fun as well. So we need to plan for that retirement. And then we need to make sure the what ifs, plan for the legacy impacts, plan for the long-term care concerns, and where that fits in your prioritization may be different. If you've seen a loved one go through this, it's of a higher priority, right?
Absolutely.
So I think the other one that you would say is more important, is very important to think about from an advanced planning perspective is some type of legal arrangement, right? Power of attorneys, getting those things in order, healthcare power of attorneys, durable power of attorneys to manage finances, and some type of will/trust. I'm a bigger fan of trust personally. They have more control, more flexibility. I like irrevocables personally.
Yes.
There's a lot of nuances there, and a lot of people will do revocable Medicare trusts or Medicaid trusts. But I don't think people want to be in a Medicaid community, Shona.
No, that's a big misconception. I'll get a lot of calls and folks will say, we have all of our money, we put it in a trust, and we get to get Medicaid. And we're going to save that money for our family's future, which is great, but the attorneys aren't telling them with what you get with Medicaid bed.
Yeah, I've never seen somebody be, you don't get excited about walking into a Medicaid community, I don't think.
No.
They do what they can. But it's a different type of community,
right?
And care level, really.
Correct. The environment is very depressing. You usually have to have a very small room, a very small sterile room. It looks like the old school nursing homes.
Can be roommates as well,
yes,
right? Not usually private.
Correct. Because the big misconception when people call me is they think that Medicaid pays for assisted living. In the state of Missouri, it does not. It only covers skilled nursing.
Yeah.
So once you run out of funds, you have to go into a shared room in a tiny little space with a roommate. You physically and cognitively may not need that, but financially you don't have the funds because you put it in a trust and now you're getting Medicaid.
Yeah, and so the biggest difference here, and there's two types of trust, and I'm going to very simplify here. So attorneys, I apologize. I'm simplifying. It's okay. There's an irrevocable and a revocable. An irrevocable is that Medicaid asset protection style of trust. Can it work for some people? Sure. But there are so many little pitfalls there. And quite frankly, I just mentioned it earlier, we lose control. I like control of my stuff, my things. I want those to be in my possession. And we lose that control with that irrevocable trust. Goes into the trust that is not your money anymore. It's in that trust money or trust fund, which is great because it can go to the beneficiaries and stuff. But now it doesn't necessarily, it qualifies for government benefits, but it doesn't give you the ability to pay for things the same way. Mm-hmm. And that's the struggle. And maybe instead of doing that, you plan in advance with a revocable trust that you control, but then you do some planning in advance to say, hey, these are the kind of communities that make sense for me. I want to be at assisted living or maybe even at home, which we can talk a little bit about mm-hmm. as well. But it gives you that flexibility and control, which I like. Yeah. So, because we don't know these things, but they're important to have these conversations. Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest other one that we mentioned there, power of attorneys. Yes. Right. Giving you the ability to have that power of attorney to help make decisions for on behalf of your loved one. Absolutely. So, all right. So anything else from that perspective? We've covered two real good ones, right? Get your financial side in order. And then I think the other one, which I think you can help people with, is what kind of community is right for me? Right. And for my loved ones. Yes. I think it's really important to start doing a search before you need it and have a good indication of where you want to be location-wise. You know, do you want to be closer to your daughter in St. Charles County, or do you want to stay in South County where you've lived your whole life? Yeah. So talking about location, that's important. And then, you know, we are not sure what level of care you're going to be when you're finally ready to make the move. Unfortunately, I see too many people waiting too long, and then their hand is kind of forced into a higher level of care. Sure. So, a lot of that is driven by finances too, right? Absolutely, yeah. So the more money you're going to spend, more money, the higher level of care you need to be. Right. So, and that gets back to that financial side of things as well. But the communities that you see a lot of times that look really nice in the commercials, let's just assume they are that way, right? Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah. Those are not typically that Medicaid type of this community. Correct. It's private pay only. Which is amenities, mm-hmm. socialization. And I'm a big fan of socialization. I'm a social individual myself, so we enjoy doing a lot of things at the office with the people in our network. And I think that helps make you young too. Oh, for sure. Keeps you healthy. Yes. You know, keeps it exciting. So those activities in those communities are much more that private pay type of situation, mm-hmm. which means the government is not going to pay for it. Correct. So if you've got assets in an irrevocable trust, because the plan is that you're going to get Medicaid, you got to understand is that the care that you're looking for, that's only a certain type of community. Right. It's not all of them. Correct. Skilled nursing. Is that where you want to be? And I don't think that's going to change, Shona. I mean, there's a lot of discussion and changes all over the place on healthcare, you know, what governmental benefits covers. I just don't think that's ever going to change. And I don't think the programs can afford it. Right. So there's a huge sticker shock that happens. That first phone call that I get when they've just started their research on how much does a community cost, it's a huge sticker shock. And actually what I hear more is the adult children saying, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay for this when I need this? And then we can and that's a perfect time to transition that conversation to be more forward thinking, right? And that's a perfect way to think about it. How do I do something different with the future? Because now you've got more options. Mm-hmm. When you're healthy, younger, you have more options. There are always options on the table. In fact, we can protect assets even for those that are in a care community today, but we still have more options the longer we plan in advance. So we got to make sure, you know, today's buckets are taken care of first. Right. Right. So, so you did mention earlier a little bit about the atmosphere and things like that. So what should you look for in a community? I think the biggest thing is when you're in a community, just how you feel when you walk in the door. Mm-hmm. Do you see people walking around? Are there lots of residents out in the lobby and going to activities, or is it kind of a ghost town? That's the first thing I look at, because I'll look at the activity calendar and it'll say all the things that they've got going on, but you don't see any residents. Everyone's in their room and it's really quiet. So the sales director will tell you, oh, we're very busy and active community, but you see nobody. So those are those little tips and tricks that I tell people to look for when you're looking for community. There's a difference between promoting activity and actually seeing it as a part of the culture, correct, so to speak. Yes. Right? I've seen communities actually stage activities because they know they've got a tour scheduled on the calendar and they have nothing going on actively. So it can be tough, but can be tough. And that's where I kind of come in I know which communities are doing the activities. Yeah. I know who's vibrant and who doesn't have a lot. So if activities aren't important to you and you don't think you're going to get connected with anybody, then maybe that's not going to be a big deal. But if you're social and you want to go out, that's a big deal to somebody if they move into a community where there's nothing going And I think that socialization is overlooked. I think that even, it keeps us engaged in what we do on a day-to-day basis. And people that are engaged in even if it's just something small, going to the mailbox or you're talking with your neighbors, those little pieces of activity make a big difference in our ability to age well, right? We need that as humans.
And I think that when seniors move into a community, they actually surprise their children, because they'll say, oh, they're not going to get involved. They're not going to get active. I have one client. She told me, my dad is not going to participate. He's not going to do anything. Now he's ahead of the food committee. He did a TED Talk. He used to do some things for the moon landing. So he did a TED Talk and did a presentation, and he is so social now.
Wow.
And it's a whole new side of her dad that she has never seen before. And it's really cool to see. And I ran into her the other day, and she was telling me all these fun things that he's doing and getting involved. And he's got a whole new lease on life now. Happy and thriving. He's very excited.
Sounds like we need to get him on a show called Serenity Wealth Now Radio, right? Yeah. How fun. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love hearing stories like that. It's just, we don't think about it like that, right? It is very personal in what we do. And it's so neat being able to help families navigate these waters it's really tough. It's something we don't like to think about, So you mentioned sticker shock a little while ago. So I kind of have my go-to kind of dollar amount per month. If you somebody said, so Shona, what is the typical cost? And obviously we know as professionals, it varies drastically.
Sure.
But when somebody just says, what is the typical cost per month on a care community?
Sure. For assisted living right now, and granted, costs go up anywhere between 1% to 3% every single year.
Yeah.
There's a few communities that put a freeze on it, but right now I would say on average, assisted living is about $6,500 a month.
Okay.
On the low end.
On the low end. Yep. And then obviously it progresses from there.
Yes.
When you look at the overall need for care and everything considered, is assisted living typically where we start, or does it, because people tend to delay these decisions, do we usually see something that starts a little bit higher on a level of care need?
Well, there's independent living, which I am a huge proponent of.
Sure.
It's actually the lowest cost, and they actually offer more of the amenities, and it's more of a senior living type of environment where they're doing everything right. The food's better.
Very nice.
Yeah, and it's a lot cheaper. It's, the average cost starts there around $35 on the lower end.
That's not bad. That's good. I mean, it's still a lot. Don't get me wrong, but
most people wait too long, and then they'll need assisted living.
Right. And I think that that's an important thing. And the statistics are very interesting on this. The duration of care need, and I'm going to use very rough numbers here, but men generally it's about a little over 2 years, 2.5-ish, and women it's about 3.5, a little over that. And I think that those numbers are skewed. And part of the reason I think they're skewed is because women historically have played more of a caregiver role in society. I'm not saying it's bad or good. Don't get me into that stuff, right? Don't get me in trouble. I'm not canceled yet, all right? So I think part of the reason for this is because we first of all, I don't go to the doctor. I refuse to go to the doctor, right? I hate it. I won't do it. I'll just sit there and suffer until it gets so bad that I have to go. We delay that on ourselves, but I think also our spouse helps keep us in, cares for us longer than they should, which then causes them more challenges as well.
Absolutely. I see the caregiver, they have so much more of a decline because they're so busy taking care of their loved one. It rapidly causes depression and burnout very easily.
It's so bad. And it's things that we can prevent. And I think part of that is just having that open, honest conversation. And I mean, I make fun of this a little bit and make jokes because I think that we should joke a little bit more and make complicated conversations. Humor can help make them a little bit easier, right? And so I always say is, I'm a big dude. Like I am. And I try real hard to stay in shape. I lift weights. I do some things, right? Retired triathlete, right? Retired triathlete, because that's a lot of work, right? But my wife, she's also in great shape. She's a rock star. She lifts weights. She's hardcore. She does all kinds of stuff. But you know what? She doesn't need to be lifting my big rear end out of bed every day.
Correct. Yeah.
It's going to cause her problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I see a lot of injuries. The caregivers taking care of their loved one, they fall and get hurt, and they're in the hospital, and now there's nobody to take care of
Yeah.
the person they're taking care of.
I mean, it just kind of it's logical, right?
Yeah.
So if I look at it that way and I say, no, Stace, I want you managing my care, not providing my care, right? That makes me feel a little bit better. And there's other things like the bathroom types of things. Like, no, my wife doesn't need to do that. Like, I draw the line there. No, you're not doing that. I want, if that has to happen, somebody else can do that. And she can make sure that that person's doing a good job. Like, I'm okay with that. That makes me comfortable. It's a very uncomfortable. I don't like talking about this.
It takes away the romance.
There you go. Right. That's not very Valentine's Day like, is it? Jeez. Yeah. No, I agree. So having these conversations in advance, being open and honest, getting that feedback, planning for it, and not being afraid to bring in professionals, I think is huge. And, there's a lot of resources out there. You get a lot of marketing on this kind of stuff. There's a lot of 1-800 numbers that are national levels. What makes you different in your approach?
I think what makes me the most different is I sit down with every client and we have a really in-depth meeting. We dive into the finances, dive into what's the most important to them, and then I help narrow that down to 2 to 3 locations. There's hundreds of options here in the St. Louis metro area. So I narrow it down to 2 to 3 places that I know they're going to be the right fit. I take them, I make the phone call for them, I schedule it, I go on the tour with them. I'm physically there to make sure they're not getting sold with these high pressure sales tactics that some of these communities give. And I don't allow my clients to get pressured into making a decision, because this is a very scary decision. This is a very important decision to make.
You should walk out, right? You should walk out and talk about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is one of the bigger decisions you'll make in your life.
Yeah.
And this literally could mean life or death for your loved one. So we're taking our time, we're looking at the right options, and then, I allow you to make the decision on where you think is going to be the best fit, but I just help guide you in that. I help you weigh out all the pros and cons for each community, and then you, at the end of the day, decide which one is going to be the right fit. Yeah,
I have a feeling you guide and kind of help coach a little bit on that decision making too. Right?
I do, just because
you know people's goals and objectives.
Right.
Absolutely. You take the time to find that out. And I know you're not going to necessarily say this, so I'm going to say it. I think that there's another flip side of that, not with alternative, not what you do, but that 1-800 national level approach. I've heard of this. I know exactly how that goes, and I know why you're structured the way you are to get more independent, more local, more client-centric. Whereas the big 1-800 style approach is really a blast. It's a database approach. You call the 1-800 number, you provide all the information. They basically put your stuff in a database. That database then gets all these communities, these hundreds of communities you just mentioned, now have all your stuff, and guess what happens? People's phones start to ring. And then they start getting in and scheduling appointments and scheduling tours and blah, 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 blah. So now you're touring hundreds of facilities that look good on, in theory, but they're those ones that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
That not all of them are the great ones. And I think what you're doing is very different. It's the 3 or 4 that might fit our need, and you're narrowing it down based on a conversation with the individual. And I also know you're a social worker, so you actually can do some assessments of needs as well.
Correct, yes.
Very different approach. And it's not just you. You've got a few folks working with you now as well.
I do. I have a team now that has helped. I've just brought Abby and Jamie on with me, and they are helping me kind of spread out and get, reach more families in the St. Louis metro area, which has been amazing.
Absolutely. It's so important. It's an incredibly important conversation to have. And Shona, population-wise, we're living longer lives, right? Which is a great thing. More and more people are turning of age as well. Right. It's a bigger percentage of our population than before. So seeing a lot of communities going up each and every day, right?
Yes, they're coming and they keep coming.
Yeah.
They'll open up and then they'll get a new owner within a year or two. And so I help keep track of all of that as well.
Now, I know that happens fairly frequently. That's one of your concerns, I assume, when you're looking at communities?
Yes. If you see a community that's had several owners within the first few years of them being open, that's kind of a red flag. The care is not consistent. And there's a few out there that are the newer ones that are doing really well, but it takes at least a couple of years for a new community to stabilize.
Now, do they ever kind of get bought out by another bigger company that you actually believe is better, newer, trustworthy kind of folks? Like, does that happen, or is it
On
it doesn't
occasion,
consolidate ever?
Yeah, and a lot of it just depends on, there's management companies and then there's owners. So a lot of folks don't realize that these communities are being managed by certain companies, and then all of a sudden they'll be under new management and then everything changes. So,
Yeah.
And then there's a new owner as well. So it can be an owner or a management company.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I thank you so much for what you do. It is so important. And folks, if you didn't have plans for Thanksgiving, geez, that's November. We'll get there. It's going to be here before we know it.
It will.
Goodness gracious, right? Valentine's Day. You probably didn't get your wife a card or flowers or anything like that. Crazy thing I'm going to challenge folks with, but what if instead you think about the real ultimate gift, which is planning in advance for the care that people could need? Because that's really, instead of about a Hallmark card, Valentine's Day should really be about caring for our loved ones and those that we find dear. So thanks, Shona, for coming in. I really appreciate it. Always a pleasure. You make conversations about things that we don't like to talk about very easy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. All right, so we're going to end this show with a little bit of a challenge. We just talked a lot about the need to plan in advance for care concerns, and some great resources available right here in the St. Louis area to make sure not only your finances, but also that community you want to be a part of, those conversations are met too. So Shona McIntyre, Senior Community Connections, check her out. Her team is a great, great, great value to the people that need to find that right community for your loved ones. Get the quality of care you deserve. On the financial side, it is important to have these conversations. People hold this off forever. I have a lot of complicated conversations. We are happy to talk about our own passing. As humans, we know it's going to happen. We know we have an expiration date. But we do not like to think about the conversations around, oh my gosh, what happens if I can't make decisions for myself? It's a control thing. I know it. I'm a control freak. I get it. Like, I don't want to think about that stuff. But you know what I did? I planned for it. I know that my financials have a plan to fund that. So my children don't have to think about it. So that my wife knows that it's not a financial conversation about me needing assistance and how she's going to care for that and all that good stuff. No, she's going to manage the care. She's going to manage the care provider. She's going to make sure that somebody helps her do that, okay? We've got a plan in place. It's important to have a plan in place, right? This is Valentine's Day week, right? Maybe there's flowers involved, Hallmark cards, or maybe just have a nice little dinner. Have a conversation about something that really does make a difference, that really matters, and it's not an easy one. It's not an easy one, but you can have some fun doing it, and it might help bringing in some resources to help, okay? I assure you, Shona has a good, easy, fun conversation about a topic that is difficult to have, all right? I do the same thing. We hang out by my couch. We talk about things that matter to people, right? Unfortunately, we have to plan for this kind of stuff. And sometimes it's when emergencies happen. Sometimes it's when mom, dad, or our loved one needs help today, right? It's not too late to plan. Sure, there could be more options if you plan in advance, but it's never too late to put something in place today, okay? Never too late. It's at least worth that conversation. That's important. Have that conversation. See what options are available to you. Understand what needs to be done, right? What documents need to be completed. What options for communities make sense for you? Where's the right place to get the care you deserve and the care your loved ones really need at this moment in time? How is it going to be funded? That is a big deal. It is expensive, folks. $8,000-$10,000 a month, easy. Adds up quick. Adds up super, super quick. So my challenge to listeners, viewers out there, have these conversations with your loved ones while we're thinking about that Valentine's Day spirit, right? That you are my Valentine kind of thing, right? No better way to think about who's important to you than making sure that these complicated conversations are mentioned and thought of in advance, okay? So have those complicated conversations. If you have any questions at all, reach out. We are a resource for you. SerenityWealthNow.com, folks. Complicated conversations at times are important to have. Get them, get the peace of mind you deserve, and then move on to the things that are more fun, right? The vacations, the trips, the lifestyle, fun stuff, right? We want to enjoy our life, but part of that means planning for those what ifs and those unknowns. So get the quality of care you need when the time comes, if the time comes. Hopefully it never does, but make sure you got that plan in place. That's how you get that financial serenity, and you know what? You deserve it too. SerenityWealthNow.com for more information.
Serenity Now! This is Serenity Wealth Now with Chris Cooper. Request a free copy of Chris's latest book, The New Holistic Retirement, by visiting SerenityWealthNow.com.
Investment advice offered through Fortis Capital Advisors.